Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Kim Brown in Baltimore. The amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has broken records and led a specialized climate agency of the United Nations to issue a somewhat dire declaration. Quote, high greenhouse gas levels mark the start of a new era of climate reality. That's according to the World Meteorological Organization, which monitors the atmosphere, weather, and climate changes. Now, greenhouse gases have reached a significant milestone of 400 parts per million for the first time ever in 2015 and surged again to new records in 2016, fueled in part by a powerful El Nino event. Now, this is also according to the WMO's annual Greenhouse Gas Bulletin. Yet, given the amount of global records being shattered for temperatures, the depletion of ice at the poles, and catastrophic weather events over recent years, the issue of climate change in the American presidential election, well, it hasn't really come up that much. Now, why is that? Well, joining us now to discuss this is Donna Smith. Donna is the executive director of the Progressive Democrats of America, and she was also formerly a legislative advocate for the California Nurses Association. Donna, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me on, Kim. It's such an important topic.
Now, Donna, your group, the Progressive Democrats of America, has joined forces with the Climate Hawks Vote movement, calling on voters to sign the Climate Voter Pledge to only vote for candidates who are dedicated to rapidly addressing the climate emergency. Can you tell us more about your organization and about this action plan?
Absolutely, and thank you for asking about it. It's too critical for any of us to not pay attention with every vote we cast this time around and every election. The climate emergency is the issue that threatens all of us without regard for where we stand politically, that's for sure. So Progressive Democrats of America, with members in 50 states all over the country, felt very strongly enough that during the Democratic Party platform debates that took place in June in Orlando, one of our most staunch members, Russell Green, was a part of the platform amendment that called for whoever is elected president to, within the first 100 days of election, take on a massive mobilization to set in place to deal with the climate emergency. So not long after that, we heard from the Climate Hawks Vote folks who were pulling together a pledge campaign so that voters, when they go to the polls, will have that issue uppermost in their minds. This isn't just climate change. It's not just global warming. It is a climate emergency that threatens us with everything from our coastal areas and the water that pools in streets on sunny days in Miami, to the migration that's already happening along some coasts of the world where people are having to move inland because of the changes in the sea levels related directly to the climate emergency. We don't have a lot of time left on this. This isn't something we can wait another 4 years to address. It's not something we can wait another 2 years to address. We have to start now. And so we felt that getting together with other groups whose voters also felt strongly about the issue of climate was critical to bringing attention to everyone who goes to the polls, everyone who marks a mail-in ballot, find out where that candidate stands. We will always only endorse through PDA those candidates that we feel have this uppermost in their minds. So people who vote for PDA endorsed candidates certainly know they're voting for someone who gives a great deal of attention to the climate emergency. But in those areas where we have not endorsed or where there are candidates you don't know where they stand, find out and make sure you're voting on climate.
Well, Donna, talk about why political commitment to action on the climate change issue is important, especially in the wake of extreme climate events that we have seen throughout the year here in the U.S., including Hurricane Matthew, including the devastating forest fires that were affecting out west, the floods in Louisiana. Why is it important for politicians to take a stand right now on the climate change issue?
Because time's running out. I mean, the reports that you're talking about coming, even the UN and coming out of almost every reputable scientific or environmental organization around the world, coming out saying that the time is running out. We're reaching the point of no return, where we don't have any time to spare to act on this and start bringing down the causes that are making we humans contribute to our own demise of this planet. Our generation stands to be the last one, the last generation that can really impact this in a way that doesn't bring a great devastation. If we think about a generation from now, 2 generations from now, and what we want people to be able to do with their lives, if what they're having to deal with is an ever-changing climate, getting hotter, getting more extreme in terms of storms. We're looking at, here we sit in Colorado, right now is where I am today in Denver, Colorado. Well, there has not been measurable rain in Colorado since the early part of August. The reality is that we are sitting at November 1st with air conditioners running because it's too warm for us to have our furnaces on yet. There's great fire danger here in the West, even in some of the months that we would think that had passed. It has a huge economic impact, as you might imagine, as public resources are dedicated to trying to deal with these weather extremes that are happening, everything from Hurricane Matthew to forest fire to blizzards that we're sure will be coming. Sometimes people will ignorantly, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way necessarily, but just in a way of not knowing, think that because we still get cold winters or because we have blizzards, that somehow means there isn't such a thing as global warming. Well, we've gone well beyond that. We've gone well beyond the point where we can afford to debate whether or not there are issues related to the climate emergency. It is real. It is happening to us. It's not just the United States that's at stake. It's the entire globe. It's the planet. We need to be engaged. And the Paris Accords, the Paris deal that was forged and was hard fought, isn't enough. We have so much more to do so that we can make sure that we are doing what we can. We're right now, we're not even really talking about reversing the trend. We're just talking about stopping some of the catastrophic forward progression towards annihilating life on the planet, towards making the kinds of decisions with our lives that will not be related to what we want in this world or what we believe, but will have to be related to whether or not the places that we choose to live are habitable and a good place to raise families and build our lives. So there's so much to do.
Yeah, so Donna, tell us more about the Climate Voter Pledge. What's that about?
Well, we're attaching to most of the information that we send out to our voters in the weeks leading up to the general election. As we all know, November 8th. We all know November 9th can't come soon enough, but November 8th, we're asking everybody to make sure on the ends of every email that we send, we put out a reminder to folks to make sure to take this pledge that that folks who are running for office this time pledge to act on the climate emergency. They pledge to help keep, whether it's fossil fuels, keeping them in the ground, whether it's making sure that we are doing everything we can to lower greenhouse gases, to pay attention to wildlife and what the climate emergency is doing to them. So taking the pledge is very simple, that people pledge to vote, Climate Hawks vote, that we pledge to vote for only those people who are dealing with the issue of climate emergency. It's really that simple.
But according to the Climate Voter Pledge website, there are 182 climate change deniers currently in Congress. Now, does this limit the choice that a voter can make in some cases where they don't have the option to vote for a candidate that supports action on climate?
Well, it may in some districts, certainly in some congressional districts, there may not be a good choice. And that means your work is cut out for you. Those of you who are in congressional districts where there isn't someone, 182 people, isn't that shameful, out of 418 in our House of Representatives and 100 in our Senate. When you look at 435, I'm sorry, in our House of Representatives and 100 in our Senate, when you look at those numbers and you think 182 of those individuals deny that there is a climate emergency, we have serious work to do on those individuals. And so if you don't have the choice of someone in your district, you will need to make sure that you study those who are on the ballot. Some districts don't have people running unopposed. Not too many this time around are running unopposed. Some are, but if you have a district where there are choices, you must choose the person who is at least not a denier, at least somebody who believes that the climate emergency is real, and then you've got to go to work on it immediately on November 9th. You know, we hear Bernie Sanders say that November 8th is just the beginning. Maybe we'll get rid of some of this vitriol that's been, running back and forth in the presidential campaign between the Republicans and the Democrats. That's really not, what we're overall concerned about, although so many of us feel like Donald Trump would be a disaster in so many ways and really has no intention of dealing with anything related to climate from what we've been able to glean. But the reality is there are people out there who are voting and voting in the right way. And Bernie tells us November 9th is the day after is when we all must be ready to go to work. He was so strong and still is strong on this issue. He will still be in the Senate. A lot of the people that, I heard Elizabeth Warren talk about this last week here in Denver. She was here with Bernie and she talked about needing to go to work on climate. She talked about the deniers in Congress, and she has to work with them. So does Bernie. But we have to put the pressure. Those of us who care about this issue must put pressure on those representatives. At PDA, we have a new group called Young Progressives Demanding Action, the YPDA, that came to us immediately after the DNC in Philadelphia. And they had been working as college students for Bernie, and they decided to partner with PDA to form YPDA chapters on college campuses all across the country. And I can tell you without a doubt, the climate emergency and voting for those who care about climate is uppermost in their minds. So if there are representatives and there are senators who want to get votes from millennials and from young people, this issue had better be one that they have very close to the top, if not the top, in those that they're working on.
So Donna, talk to us about the influence that the fossil fuel industry and the lobby groups have on our electoral system and how we can change that. Because I've heard this from different groups before, like 350.org, for example, and the Union of Concerned Scientists, those who have been subpoenaed from the chairman of the House Committee on Science and Technology, Texas Republican Lamar Smith, regarding his investigation into the investigation from state's attorney generals from Massachusetts and New York about the effect that Exxon has had on the climate and what they knew and their scientists knew and the data that they allegedly tried to conceal from the public regarding climate change. But the influence of money and lobby groups has had a tremendous effect on whether or not these movements go forward.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I'm going to give you a really good example here in Colorado where we had such great work going on by Food and Water Watch and 350.org and others who were working to get anti-fracking measures on the ballot. We've had a shameful situation here, and it's happened across the country where localities, cities, counties, their people go and vote that they don't want fracking in their communities. They don't want the health hazards from it, and they want fossil fuels kept in the ground. Those votes were held legally. The citizens went to the polls and made those decisions. Here in Colorado, the governor and the state actually sued some of those municipalities to make sure that those measures would not be found constitutional by the state constitutions. So in Colorado, those decisions were overturned, sadly. Our governor, John Hickenlooper, some people call him Frackenlooper, stood in front of cameras and took a glass of what he said was water taken from a fracking site and drank it as if that was a demonstration of the safety of that water. But in any case, we had a couple of ballot measures that signatures were being gathered to get those to the ballot so that citizens would again say, no, the state can't overturn a vote of the people. If it happens in a municipality that those citizens wish not to have fracking sites there, they shouldn't have to do that. We should be able to vote to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And those measures, sadly, did not make it to the ballot this time around. And what was just annoying and very illustrative of the problem you're talking about, the money that the fossil fuel industry and oil and gas is putting into fracking alone, was so enormous that even after after the measures did not make it to the ballot, they were running ads thanking various groups in Colorado for having kept these terrible measures off the ballot, keeping energy independence foremost in the voters' minds. It was a shameful thing, I thought. Now, to follow up, they have another measure on the ballot this time around that would make it more difficult for citizens to get measures to the ballot, and that's being funded heavily by the fossil fuel industry because they do not want citizens to be able to get access to the ballot and limit their influence to be able to build fracking sites wherever they want to and get more fossil fuel profits out of the ground. So sadly, the influence is everywhere across this country, whether you talk to people in Pennsylvania, Colorado, California, Oklahoma. My goodness, they have apps developed for their phones that give earthquake forecasts based on what's happening there with so much fracking going on. It's an insane thing that's happening in this country with the fossil fuel industry. The only industry that has more lobby money poured into these elections is the pharmaceutical industry. Go figure. So big pharma and the oil and gas industry, they sadly, because these folks have families too. You want to sit down sometimes with them and say, really, you can't be doing this to your children and grandchildren, but apparently the profits are so dear that they can't see past the current need to make money for their stockholders, even if it means horrible damage to our planet.
Donna, you raise a good point about fracking, and you sort of speak from a perspective that a lot of progressives come from, that who may have been supporting Bernie Sanders during the Democratic primary and who are quite highly disappointed, rightfully so, at the lack of discussion about climate change between the two major party candidates right now, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Now, to her credit, Secretary Clinton acknowledges that climate change is a problem and that it's happening. However, when she uses language describing fracking shale gas, and she describes it as a bridge fuel, that's sort of like nails on the chalkboard for a lot of people in the progressive environmental movement who disagree vehemently and who think that fracking is very damaging not only to the land but to the water and to the air as well, with the release of methane gas, which in some instances is way more damaging than carbon dioxide emissions. So for people who are very much passionate about protecting the environment and who want to, quote unquote, do the right thing at the polls, what do you say to them?
Well, with the presidential race is concerned, here's the interesting thing, and Bernie Sanders still brings this up, and we look to him not because, at this point, he's not our presidential candidate on the Democratic side, as much as some of us wish he were. The reality is that when the platform fight went forward, it was Clinton's team and Bernie's team that worked on the issue related to the climate emergency. So there can be no deniability, plausible or otherwise, of where Democrats stood on the issue of climate. So as we look towards this election, even if Hillary has not been doing enough, and she certainly hasn't, to talk about this issue, nor certainly has Donald Trump done much of anything to talk about climate, except to reassure people that he'll get rid of regulation, which is exactly the wrong direction. The reality is Bernie has said that platform is not going to gather dust on a shelf like it has in the past, and we are going to hold Hillary, if Hillary is elected next week, we are going to hold her feet to the fire in terms of getting ready to go on mobilizing, and the world and the United States really taking a very strong leadership position in mobilizing the powers of this earth. All of the countries on this earth have an interest in climate and protecting our environment and stopping this march towards disaster that we apparently have not convinced enough of our brothers and sisters to join us in yet. So I would say, if you're talking about the presidential race, I don't think there's another choice except to vote a Democratic vote for Hillary Clinton. That's what I'm going to do. It's not what I set out to do at the beginning of the primary, but it is what I'm going to do this time. And in large part, it has to do with climate, because I believe in that platform that the Democrats passed will be a guiding document for us to say, this was worked out between the two campaigns in the primary. This is what Democrats want to see happen. They want to see a mobilization. They want to see the United States take leadership on this, and they want to move quickly within the first 100 days after the inauguration on January 20th.
Indeed. We've been speaking with Donna Smith. She is the Executive Director of the Progressive Democrats of America. Donna, we appreciate your time today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Vote climate.
All right. And thank you for watching the Real News Network.